Let's do this.
It's time for Hanging with Langan.
I like that she's got a big dirty mouth that gets her in trouble.
Wow.
Stop me, 'cause I'm having a good time.
Alrighty, kids, we're back. You're hanging with Langan. You know what I do? I bring you interviews, chats with people that are fun, heart, smart, everything from academics to alcoholics to authors and everyone in between. So if you're watching this, well, you'll know you're watching it because you're watching it. Please share. Just share it. Say, hey, folks, we got a great interview coming up, and just watch it. That's how we grow the numbers. That's what we do. So I want to introduce you, bringing her on in just a moment. I have a fantastic, talented writer with me. Her name is Annette Berkovits. She is the author of The Corset Maker. And there's a quote in her book, which I think many people have heard: whoever saves a soul saves the world. I just love that. It gets me a little emotional. I get fan clapped. What do I get? Verklempt. So I met Annette in a writing workshop years ago. So her latest, it's a historical novel, The Corset Maker, and it's based on the life of her mother, Dora, who grew up in a strict Orthodox Jewish home in Warsaw, Poland, circa World War II. And in this, I just finished the book, Annette weaves a story of a rebel. Her mother seems to be a bit of a rebel in times of just global crisis and war. And there are threads of I'm a little tired today, you guys. Nazism, antisemitism, and sexism. You know, some things don't seem to change. It's really it's a fast-paced narrative, and there's a young heroine. She navigates the world in search of her destiny, from Poland to Paris to Palestine to Spain. It's just a really riveting, it's a historical novel, keep in mind, based on her mom. So Annette Berkovits was born in Kyrgyzstan, I said it, and she grew up in post-war Poland and at the time the fledgling state of Israel. John Clayton, he's an award-winning author of literary fiction. He says that Annette has made central moments of 20th century history come alive, and I can tell you she definitely does. So let me welcome her now. Let's bring on the gifted, the talented Annette. Hi, Annette.
Good morning, Maureen. How are you?
Did I do justice with my introduction of you?
You did, but I just want to add that as an author, there's no but. As an author, I decided to reclaim my maiden name, which I would have kept if I were getting married today. So I decided as an author, why not reclaim it? My maiden name is Libeskind. Some people may know the Libeskind name because my brother is very famous, but I'm not.
Yeah, well, you will be after this interview. Everyone will know you. Well, okay, the reason I passed over Libeskind was like, oh my gosh, I don't think I could say it right. And it does mean love child, you told me.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So, well, since you brought up your brother, tell people who your brother is.
My brother is an architect, Daniel Libeskind. He's the master planner for rebuilding Ground Zero. He's the architect of the Jewish Museum in Berlin, which is the most widely visited museum in Germany now, which is amazing. He's also got buildings and museums on every continent. So
amazing. It's just, you come from an amazing family. Well, you too. All right, so let's talk about The Corset Maker. Sum it up for people. I know 488 pages, but sum it up for people.
Well, what is the book about? The book, I'll start by saying that I felt a responsibility as a child of survivors, and as a survivor myself, I suppose, because I was born during the war, to say something about fascism and to say something about how women in particular deal with violence and wars, and what positions they may have had before the war, and how war changes their understanding of the world. So I was inspired by my mother, who was in fact a corset maker in Warsaw, and who, like my protagonist, opened a corset and brassiere shop on Warsaw's main street when she was 17 and a half, almost 18 years old.
Wow.
And that was something unheard of. Even today, you don't hear 18-year-olds opening up stores on main streets in major cities. And Warsaw, before World War II, was considered the Paris of the East. It was very cosmopolitan, very vibrant city. And to open a shop on the main street, Marszałkowska Street, it just blows my mind every time I think about how she managed to pull this off with her friend. And the friend is also in the book. So my mother herself went through incredible ordeals during World War II. She was a prisoner in a Soviet gulag. And I always wondered what characteristics did it take for a woman to survive brutal prison in Siberia without shoes, I might note. So she had incredible influence on me with her ability to overcome the most difficult circumstances and move on. And in Poland, after World War II, when my parents came back to their native country, Poland, to look for family survivors, they found no one. And then the borders closed and they couldn't leave. So I grew up there. But my mother was the inspiration for it, but also several of her friends who were amazingly courageous women really ahead of their time. These are women that would be comfortable in today's milieu for women. But let's say in the 1930s, they were really different from the mainstream. So one friend fought in the Spanish Civil War.
Is that what influenced part of your book? Because part of it is set in the Spanish Civil War.
Yes, so exactly. What I did is these women, Brunka, my mother's business partner, also an 18-year-old girl, and my mother's friend Ruth, who fought in the Spanish Civil War. And my mother had a friend, Raquel, who helped her survive in the Soviet gulag. And all these inspirational women, I melded into one character, Rivka Burr.
Well, Annette, let me reintroduce you for those who are just tuning in now. She's an author. She's so accomplished. There's like 80 million things. If you follow her, you're like, wow, I am such an underachiever. Annette Libeskind? Say your maiden name. Libeskind? I said it right? Yes. Annette Libeskind Berkovits, and her book is called The Corset Maker. It's a historical novel, a compilation of women through one character, including her mom, her mom's best friend. Her mother was Dora, who was a corset maker at 17, 18 years old. She was raised in a strict Orthodox Jewish home. I mean, that's even remarkable. Even if she were a secular woman, now she's, and the Orthodox tradition, but she seemed like a bit of a rebel. The character bucks the system, but did your mother buck the system in terms of her family?
Absolutely. My mother was not a bit of a rebel. My mother was a grand size rebel. I mean, to leave home and open a business, it was just totally unheard of. I don't know much about the fights she must have had with her father about not following the path. But I know my mother told me many times that it broke her heart to see her own mother as a baby factory. She didn't want that path.
And that is clear in the book. So did your mother, given all that transpired around that time, we're talking the 1930s, pre-Hitler, and in the book you see all of this foreshadowing of what's to come, and also those who don't believe it can get that bad, which I think was very common amongst many people at the time. did she come to embrace her faith, or was that just part of who she was in her cultural background?
Well, I think she retained, just like my character, Rivka, sort of the basic tenet of the Jewish faith about repairing the world. That Hebrew phrase tikkun olam, which is repairing the world, and that tenet of the Jewish faith really spoke to her. So that's how she conducted her life. She was not a religious woman. After the Holocaust, both my parents said, "Who can believe in God after what has happened?" And for some survivors, their reaction was the opposite. They became more religious than before, and for some, they just couldn't reconcile faith as it was practiced before in their homes.
Listen, the Corset Maker is available on Amazon, and just do a search of the Corset Maker, and you can get it just about anywhere. But get it at Amazon and read it and write a really great review, because you'll be compelled to do that. You'll just be like, where can I write this great review? And you'll want to. So much in this book. You talk about your mother being in the Soviet gulag. That is not in the book, but it sounds like the things that transpired for her elsewhere were probably, there were parallels. Do you want to talk about that?
Absolutely. That's why I just want to talk for one moment about the difference between based on and inspired by. When you read about new shows on Netflix, let's say, or new books, the words based on and inspired by are thrown around very loosely. To me, based on means that it's the literal experience, that everything that happens to the protagonist, that everything. Inspired by means that it's the larger ideas, the themes, the beliefs of a person become incorporated into the protagonist. Now, in the case of my book, I would say that it's actually a hybrid of based on and inspired by. There are parts of the Corset Maker that are literally true. My mother literally opened a shop at 18 with her teenage friend Branka. My mother went illegally into Palestine to search for her sister.
Oh, that's true. Oh, you guys, that is an amazing part of the book. Wow, that's true. Her sister Golda, who may or may not have been the real name.
But may not been the real name, but
wow, that's a riveting.
And who is reflected in the book. So those are, and now the Spanish Civil War is very much modeled after my mother's friend Ruth. Those are literally true. The reason I didn't actually write a memoir about my mother.
Yes, I want to.
I wrote a memoir about my father in the unlikeliest of places. It's also on Amazon and everywhere books are sold.
In the unlikeliest of places is a memoir about her father. I wanted to reiterate that.
And it's his survival. It's his attitude towards the war and towards this political situation, but also my reflections on his attitude. That's in that book. And I would have loved to do a parallel thing for my mother, but I realized my mother was a very, very different person from my father. She didn't talk about her experiences and about her background, very little. And I think that was generally her persona. She was more sort of introspective and quiet. But I think after what happened, after she lost her family members in Poland, her mother, some of her family members emigrated to Palestine before World War II. So those survived, but those that remain, my mother's 4 younger sisters and her mother, they all perished in Treblinka. So she couldn't, I don't know if getting over it is the right word, but she could never adapt to that loss. So she talked very little. And so I felt I had pieces of her story, but not enough to write an honest memoir because it would have too many holes. So I said, well, I have these inspirational women, my mother most foremost, and her friends, and I can fashion that into a novel. And
where did your mother live out her life? Where was she at the end of her life? Where was she?
New York. She was in New York, and she was not happy. My mother, when we left Poland, when the political situation thawed enough so the Jews could leave Poland in 1957.
Oh boy!
Went to Israel. My mother had her two sisters and a brother who survived, and she was so thrilled to have those family members. My father, on the other hand, he was 48. And in Israel at that time, 48 was being really, really old.
It is in America too, if you try to get an audition or a TV or a movie. All right, go ahead.
First, he didn't speak Hebrew. He spoke Yiddish, that was his mother tongue. He was so happy to go to Israel thinking he was going to be able to speak Yiddish. Well, no. You could not speak Yiddish in 1957 in Israel. They were trying to build a new country with a new language, well, actually an ancient language, but Yiddish was scorned upon, not welcome. He was shocked. He was horrified by that. And he couldn't get a job. And my father had worked all his life since he was a kid. And not getting a job was devastating.
Gutting.
There was also one other thing. He had one member of his family that survived Auschwitz in Pennsylvania in the United States. So he decided after almost 2 years of trying to get a job and being unable that he was leaving if his sister could get him a visa.
To Pennsylvania. Where in Pennsylvania?
Harrisburg.
Ah, my aunt lived there for many years. Interesting. So when your father got to Israel and people were frowning upon speaking Yiddish, they were trying to get everybody on board with Hebrew or coming?
Yeah. Yes.
But it was such a mix of people coming from so many places.
I know. It was an amazing time. There were people from a lot of, at that time, well, there was a huge number of Eastern European Jews, but then there were also Middle Eastern Jews coming in. So there was a huge influx of people from different cultures, and they wanted to unify people with one language. So Hebrew was it. So this was a traumatic moment for my mother, because my father left.
And your mother, of course, went with him. I just want to show this picture of your parents and yourself and your brother. You're adorable. I can't take it. You're like the cutest little thing. Look at your mother's face and eyes. Just in that picture, it seems to show what you're talking about her in some ways.
I think her sadness is that, here she was posing for a family photo with her almost newborn baby, and you don't see a smile.
No, and her eyes are downcast.
Yes.
And your dad they're a very beautiful couple and a beautiful family, but what your mother endured, and what people endure. And the parallels
to Israel.
And
that, but she also didn't want to break up the marriage. So she was at a very difficult. She was 50 years old. She either had to leave the little bit of family that survived and come to America to join my father, or break up the marriage. And I was equally torn, because I was very close to my father. And the idea that we may not be reunited was absolutely horrifying to me. I was a teenager. I was 15.
Yeah, I was going to ask how old.
Yeah, I was 15. I couldn't stand that, but I also didn't want to leave Israel. So it was a traumatic moment for all of us. But I'm going to set that aside now, because I've written about this in my coming of age memoir that's coming out in September.
Oh, do tell.
Yes, it's all in that book called Aftermath, Coming of Age on Three Continents, because I did, in fact, come of age on three continents. So we can talk about that at another time, but right now.
Let me reintroduce you. My guest is author Annette Libeskind Berkovits. The Corset Maker is her book. It's a historical novel. It is based upon, inspired by her mother, Dora. And the main character goes from Poland to Paris to Palestine to Spain during the Civil War. It really encompasses the reviews. It really encompasses that time in the 20th century. It's a riveting book. There is a romance in there. Was that based on anything, or was that just your creativity putting that in there?
No, it was not based on any specific romance, but one of the things that I wanted to kind of show is that young people, young women in particular, in this case, I'm talking about Rivka Berg, make decisions early on in their lives that can affect and change the entire course of their lives. And people don't think about that, but you make a spur-of-the-moment decision when you are 19 or 20, and then it takes you in a direction that could be totally different from what you would normally expect based on your background. So this is how Rivka ended up in Spain.
Something keeps dinging.
And I just want to say a word, if I may, Maureen, about why I included the Spanish Civil War. Not only did I have an exemplar of a woman who was incredibly courageous and fought with in the American Brigade in the Spanish Civil War, but the more research I did, the more I discovered, which I sort of knew, but I didn't really know, that the Spanish Civil War was the practice by the fascists for World War II. It was a practice run. That catastrophe in Guernica, where they came on a market day and they bombed civilians, and so many just died in the market shopping for groceries. That was an experiment to see how things work. They in Spanish Civil War they went into small towns, and small towns in Spain all have the bull rings. They would herd the population into the bull ring, close them in, and shoot them like fish in a barrel. That was a practice run for World War II. And people don't realize the Spanish Civil War ended. It ended a couple of months before World War II broke out, but Hitler's people and Franco's people cooperated on testing all of the strategies. Yes. So I thought it was very important.
Annette, to watch. Oh, I didn't know that. And that's a lesson. And that's why it's so great to write these things, what you're doing. You're bringing the personal with the global. And to see man's inhumanity to others and to watch it happening today again.
Exactly. It's echoes of history, seeing the bombings and the cities in Ukraine. That reminds me of everything, every little piece of research I did for the Spanish Civil War. And then later in France and in Poland, of course, it happened across the continent, but it's being repeated. And, I hear, you turn on the news and you hear these phrases, illiberal democracy or Christian democracy or white nationalism. And it's nothing but another word for fascism. It's the same theories that Hitler espoused, Franco, Mussolini, and more recently Viktor Orban in Hungary and Putin in Russia. And those are the ideas of hate, the ideas of loss of rights for different people. So
where do you think we're headed? You got a little frozen there. Where do you think we're headed here in our country and overall globally?
Well, I think I think democracy is in danger because a very substantial proportion of our population is supportive of these illiberal ideas that are being espoused in the various media. And we're in a dangerous time. And I think people who don't agree with the ideas of hate need to speak out. My way of speaking out was writing this book. And I want to say something about the cover. I didn't get a chance when you showed the book. There's the book. You see, some people have asked me about the swastika right here on the cover.
Yes, yes.
And some people have actually been upset by it, especially some of people, Jewish readers, have said, why did you put a swastika? Well, the reason is this. A huge majority of the millennials, people between ages of, say, 26 and 41, know nothing about Nazism. They know nothing about Nazi symbols. They don't know that this is a symbol of hate. But I made sure this symbol right here, even though it's recognizable swastika, it is not Hitler's swastika. People don't know that Hitler ordered the swastika to have very specific colors. These lines that I'm pointing to here, I don't know if you can.
I can't see you pointing.
They have to be red. It has to be on a white background. This is exactly the opposite of Hitler's orders for how the swastika is supposed to be represented. Here it is small, it's on a gray background, it's dying, or at least it represents my hope for it to die out. So that's why I have it here. That's why I put it on the cover, so that people understand that this is not a book about fascism, but it's a book about anti-fascism.
Excellent point. Excellent point. The Corset Maker is the book. Moving into maybe a bit lighter, we're talking about historical novels. And I love genealogy and research and what have you. I love it. I found out that my boyfriend, my man friend, I'm too old to boyfriend, my man friend, I don't know if I told you this, his mother never told him, but she was full-on Jewish from Romania. Full on, never told him. Who knows why? Maybe, protection. Yeah. He was raised Catholic. His father was Sicilian descent, but I did the research and I took them back to Galati in Romania, about 6 hours south of Odessa, which I was hoping to go to in the fall. I thought it'd be nice to go to Bucharest and take the train to Galati, but I did not realize that in Romania, other than Germany, the greatest number of Jews were killed, from my research, in Romania. I did not know that, according to my research. I mean, I could be incorrect, but that is what I read.
There were huge numbers of communities that were totally wiped out.
Decimated.
But I think people that have hidden their Jewish background, I think goes all the way to the Inquisition, to the 15th century. Where Jews had to either hide who they were or be expelled or be killed. So
there you go. It's interesting because then going back to the 1910 census, his grandparents, next door neighbors in Pittsburgh, the Squirrel Hill area of Pittsburgh, where that temple shooting happened in recent years, their next door neighbor.
I just interrupt you for a second. My brother is working on redoing that.
Your brother, David Libeskind, the world-renowned architect?
Yes, he was there.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Next door neighbor was Langan, my last name. How fascinating is that? So my mom is from Ireland. All my grandparents are Irish. My father's first generation here. And it's very interesting to me when we talk about historical novels. My mom, they owned their land. So even though there was 10 children, you had your land. And if you had your land, you could have your animals, you could have your crops. If you were a tenant farmer like my father's family, you were beholden to whatever, very wealthy British person owned that land, who took that land once upon a time, and you had a plot. And that's, of course, the most hardy crop was the potato, where you could feed and it could be stretched, and of course during the famine. But it's interesting. I went through a lot of the what we would call small claims court today, but where somebody, if they stole a sheep, or if there was a bar fight, if somebody encroached on another's land, or you didn't have the dog registered. Some people, if you stole something, you would be shipped off to Australia for 7 years, and of course you couldn't come back. Where would you get the fare to come back? Very harsh. But looking at my father's family, to see all these little court issues going on back and forth, I have the records. I just think the juxtaposition of people who own land and people who had to rent their land, just the different trajectories. So I'm very fascinated about potentially writing some type of historical novel around all these people that I know of. And it's just fascinating to me. That's why I loved reading your book, the compilation of people coming from their different backgrounds.
Yes, and I just want to say,
we froze a minute. What you just want to say, pick it up from there.
My intent was to show the tenor of the times and the politics and the fascist actions that were led to. But I also, at the human level, my book is about friendship between these two women and what happens when a man comes into the picture and how that impacts their relationship. It's also about motherhood, different ways you could be a mother. I don't want to do spoilers, but
don't do a spoiler, because it's such a beautiful part of the book. It makes me cry with joy, really, with joy. It makes me feel so happy, that part of the book, which you have to read it. Annette Libeskind Berkovits, her book is called The Corset Maker. Here you go. It's available on Amazon, or wherever you want to get your books. You can get it on the Kindle. You can just go to the .com. And I also want to give a shout out, you guys. Friday, May 20th, I'm going to be working on my solo stand-up show that I'm taking to Edinburgh, Scotland in August. It's called Don't Make Me Hate You. It's going to be in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, Friday night. It's going to be an intimate, small crowd, or it could be a huge crowd, but I'm going to work out bits. I'll get your feedback on some things. And so it's going to be a bit of a workshop. Yeah, I'm going to do my stand-up, but we're going to be adjusting it for the UK crowd. So I'd love to get your references and hear what you have to say. Comedy Cabaret, Doylestown. If you want tickets, go to the door, or go to email Marilyn at Comedy Cabaret, Marilyn at Comedy Cabaret, or go to maureenlangan.com/gigs. You'll see all the information there, because I'd love for you to come out and we'll have fun with it. It's kind of cool to do something like that. And again, get Annette Libeskind Berkovits' book, The Corset Maker. I'm so glad you got to hang out with me today.
Thank you so much. Hanging with you is always fun, and watching your performance is even more fun. I enjoyed it last week. So
thank you.
I'm looking forward to more shows, and I brought my friends. I encourage everybody, bring your friends. You'll have great fun with Maureen.
Thank you, Annette. I'm going to put you in the back room. And you guys, I want you to follow me at Maureen Langan. There are so many great interviews I've done. Hanging with Langan. And we'll have more. We'll keep them coming. But if you subscribe, go to Apple, go to Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, and just hang with Langan. So until we meet again, you know the routine. Mwah.
No, you cannot
Maybe.
leave me like that.
Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review, and feel free to share it with a friend.
Please don't go, please.
I'll be back.
Au revoir.